Hello everybody, my name is Valerie Flessati and I've been involved with different peace organisations over many years, CND, Movement for the Abolition of War and Pax Christi. And end of the 1990s, I had the idea that one could create a peace trail which would attract people to the different sites around London in particular, because that's where I live, that have anything to do with the history of peace individuals, ideas, initiatives, organisations. And so I created a peace trail for London back then, which I've revised since. And this talk is about how to create a peace trail. One of the greatest challenges we have in the peace movement is how to reach new audiences. We want to stop talking to the converted and reach people who may never have been to a meeting or joined an organisation. We want to persuade them that war can be abolished because there are more sensible ways of resolving conflict. Everyone agrees that we need more peace, not war. Yet most people know much more about military history than about peace history. And this shapes our thinking. Peace is too often thought of as simply the absence of war. We want to strengthen public understanding of what peace includes, the things that make for peace. That involves raising awareness about individuals, movements, ideas, and initiatives from all periods of history concerning the promotion of peace, overcoming violence, and abolishing war. Peacemaking needs to be a much more prominent place in our culture, so that we understand the essential components for constructing peace and recognize when it's happening. Peace trails are an enjoyable way of bringing this hidden history to life. A couple of things are working in our favor. People are very interested in heritage, especially exploring family and local history. From a different angle too, Black Lives Matter has provoked a healthy discussion about our monuments and statues. Who gets commemorated and are they worthy of honour? Who and what has been ignored in standard histories? Yet another incentive is that walking is so good for our physical and mental health, and is currently being promoted in a way to avoid driving and cleanse the air. City walks, open architecture weekends, and local trails are very popular, so why not peace trails too? In the 1990s, I devised a peace trail through London, which I then revised and expanded to offer a second trail through the City of London. There are now peace trails for Leeds, Bradford, Coventry, Cambridge, Manchester, Birmingham, Carmarthen, Cardiff, and many other places. Perhaps you're part of a group which is planning a trail where you live. I hope this introduction will give you some ideas and encouragement to give it a go. It's a great activity for your group to discuss over the winter months. First of all, choose the most obvious sites with a peace connection. Here you can see that my central London route includes places that are very much on the normal tourist track, so people do not have to go out of their way to see them. I tried to make my trail popular rather than specialist in appeal. I obviously hope that members of peace movements, justice and human rights organisations will enjoy it, but I also want to introduce the hidden history of peace people and their ideas to those who might not have come across them or thought about this much before. The very people who will go and see the changing of the Guard or the Tower of London and not be immediately critical of the militarism that those popular sites represent. As you'll discover, planning a trail immediately throws up all sorts of questions and dilemmas. Who merits inclusion? What does peace include? How will you interpret it? Will you include war memorials, for example? What kind of monuments? Look for variety. And where are they? Plot them on a map and then join up the dots. Is there something worth taking people to see today? How can we use this trail? Who's it aimed for? Obviously, I wanted to feature the people who are well known for their non-violence and humanity and commemorated somewhere in London. But also to introduce some less well known. If you're wondering who William Randall Cremer was, he was the first British Nobel Peace Prize winner, a carpenter and trade unionist who became an MP and campaigner for international arbitration. His forgotten gravestone was obscured by brambles when we found it. And on the right here, you have Dr. Salter, pacifist, Quaker, and independent Labour MP for Bermondsey, and his wife Ada, who was the very first woman mayor of a London borough. In telling the interesting stories of these people's lives, we can add another meaning to the word heroes. What about the hidden and lonely courage of the conscientious objectors, who were usually despised in their own day and suffered unspeakable punishment and even death for their sort of heroism? This is the monument to the conscientious objectors of all times and all countries, and it's in Tavistock Square, the start of my peace trail. I wanted to tell some of these stories, however, briefly, and also to show that peacemakers come from every century. In fact, I wish there were more memorials celebrating peacemakers further back in history. I also wanted to convey the wide variety of monuments that there are once you start looking. Buildings, plaques, gravestones, windows, statues, murals, trees, memorials from every culture and religion. As I said, I wanted to find things that would be near the main tourist attractions in London so that visitors who were not necessarily into peace could easily include them. There is a surprising amount. For example, here are some of the sites around Westminster. Martin Luther King is among the modern martyrs depicted on Westminster Abbey. He's fifth from the left. Next to him is Archbishop Romero, Oscar Romero of El Salvador, who was assassinated the day after he told the military not to kill other Salvadorians. And next to him again is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Outside the Abbey is this plaque to the victims of violence, oppression and war. And on the Methodist Central Hall nearby, this tablet records the first meeting of the UN General Assembly. Did you know that it took place in London in 1946? It's a surprise to many. Parliament Square now includes Nelson Mandela, unveiled by Gordon Brown, another statue of Gandhi unveiled by David Cameron, and the first statue depicting a woman, Millicent Fawcett, unveiled in the presence of Theresa May. It's easy to be cynical about the cost and intentions behind these statues, but why don't we use them to our advantage as a lesson in peace education? Here are two anti-slavery monuments, an ornate 19th century fountain near Parliament and a modern one in the city with columns representing sugarcane on the plantations. And this raises the theoretical question, what does peace include? We'll all have a different interpretation of this. I wanted to indicate that it includes human rights, racial justice, women's rights, but at the same time, not stretch this too far away from the specific focus on non-violence and opposition to militarism. My impression is that for some of the other city trails, Bradford and Manchester, for example, the creators have adopted a broader interpretation, included some war memorials, and more of the social and labour history connected to those cities' industrial past. Every trail will have a different flavour. However, There are so many sites in London that I soon realised there could be an entire women's suffrage trail, an entire freedom and human rights trail. On the left here, you've got a scroll in Victoria Street commemorating the suffragettes. And Anne Frank's tree outside a pub in Covent Garden is dedicated to a tolerant world free of bigotry. So whilst making the wider connections, I felt London required a narrower interpretation. As it is, many valid approaches to peacemaking are represented, demonstrating that there is plenty of scope for everyone's motivation, talents, and contribution. So here you've got all sorts of different perspectives, which I think can be encompassed, if you like, in how we interpret peace. Peacemaking is also part of everyone's history and everyone's responsibility. Nor is it just a job for pacifists, which is why I included Lord Mountbatten. Not everyone would agree. I thought he deserved to be on the trail because of his 1979 speech against nuclear weapons, delivered not long before he was killed. As a military man, I can see no use for any nuclear weapons which would not end in escalation, with consequences that no one can conceive. The trades and professions of those featured on the trail include everyone from industrialists to monks. Another consideration is that there must be something worth sending people to see today. It's no good, in my view, saying this is where something happened a long time ago. For example, to feature Soho Square because there used to be a lot of vigils outside what was the Defence Sales Organisation, but there's no actual good reason to go and look at it now. You might be interested in some of the places I rejected for one reason or another. Professor Joseph Rotblat would be a deserving candidate as the physicist who resigned from the Manhattan Project during World War II, when it became clear that Germany was not developing an atom bomb. He devoted his life to nuclear disarmament and won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1995. But this mundane sign on a building at Bart's Hospital did not seem worth a detour. And unfortunately, the newish plaque on his pugwash office near the British Museum is so high up as to be illegible. So I look forward to something more visible in memory of Joseph Rotblat. I would love to have included this beautiful modern monument near Wapping, but reluctantly decided that it was really another war memorial. If it had had some wording or dedication to peace for all nations, I might have stretched it, but sadly, I didn't feel it fitted in. Ultimately, your trail needs to be practical and enjoyable to walk. Think about access to transport, public transport along the way, as people do get tired or may have to leave early. Nor do you want long gaps. 10 minutes walking is probably the maximum between stops. I was frustrated that for my City of London trail, there weren't suitable sites a bit closer together. For example, despite its rich history, I could find no peace site near St. Paul's Cathedral. I searched in vain for a memorial to John Colet after reading that on Good Friday 1513, Colet, as Dean of St. Paul's, preached an anti-war sermon to Henry VIII and his army, which was preparing to go to war against France. Incidentally, another decision to be made is whether you're going to take your walkers inside a building. I certainly wanted everything to be free, which restricted how much I did that. How do we use the trail? The trail is aimed at individuals, families, schools, groups of visitors, students, tourists, and Londoners alike. People can and do follow the trail for themselves using the map and description in the booklet. And then, pretty regularly, we've offered guided walks to all kinds of adult groups. Invariably, the participants express their surprise and pleasure at how much they've learned about an unknown side to London. The movement for the abolition of war has also organised the trail as a mystery walk for children. This was pioneered by Tim Wallace, then of the National Peace Council, at the same time as I was devising the Peace Trail, and the route is pretty similar. It's a bit like a treasure hunt. Every child gets a puzzle book with clues to solve and a passport to get stamped at each location. Apart from the year when everyone got drenched, every occasion was very enjoyable and the children were excited by their discoveries. Now, what about our local areas? They too have great potential. Connecting to local issues and significant anniversaries is a good hook and a way of starting your own traditions. During the centenary of the First World War, my local group of history enthusiasts created a trail telling the story of the conscientious objectors of Haringey. We got Heritage Lottery funding for the project and were able to publish this booklet. The trail runs from Finsbury Park in North London and finishes outside the Salisbury pub, which is where, on International Conscientious Objectors Day in 2019, we installed a memorial to the 350 local conscientious objectors. We were amazed at the public interest and response. What about trails elsewhere? There is a growing number, as you can see here. Some have been produced by enthusiastic peace groups. Some obtained funding from local authorities or businesses. A few years ago, in a concerted project with European funding, a series of peace trails were developed in 7 cities: Berlin, Budapest, Manchester, Paris, The Hague, Turin, and Vienna. The project is called Discover Peace. And if you'd like to do a spot of armchair tourism, the website is well worth a visit. Other peace trails are still in progress, and a very new one has been created in Prague. We also need to be discriminating in order to focus closely on the message we want to get across. Be critical about what you choose and don't be afraid to leave something out. Often, peace paths actually commemorate war, and their treatment can be quite different. Here are 2 examples at locations of First World War carnage. What turns a war zone into a peace path? Is it about turning remembrance into an explicit rejection of war with an appeal for reconciliation and tolerance? Reflecting on the contradiction, Rob Fairmichael in Northern Ireland has written about the approach he and his colleagues adopted for the County Mayo Trail. The Mayo Peace Park, he wrote, in Castlebar is actually an extended war memorial park. And Innate, the Irish Network for Nonviolent Action, Training and Education, felt that there had to be a better way to use the term peace, since that memorial is actually much more about war. And that everything using the term peace should actually be examining alternatives to war and violence. So, to sum up, here's how to create a peace trail in 6 steps. Start a list of places connected to people and organisations that have promoted peace. Go and check that there is something to see. Take photographs, research the facts. Prepare the text and a map and test it out for yourself. Publish it as a booklet, a website or an app, and then advertise it widely through libraries, teachers, tourist spots, museums, social media. Try and get some reviews. Organise an event to walk the trail. Check for significant anniversaries and tell the press. So that's it. If you decide to create a trail, good luck, and I'll look forward to seeing the result. Thank you for listening.